Okay, have you finished your business agenda?
I think so.
Oh, good.
We're good. We have a pretty light agenda.
All right, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming.
Came down from Farmington with some stops in various businesses to tour some places and talk with a lot of people on the way down. It's been a busy, long day as usual. And I come from Farmington, which, you know, is about 100 miles from here. About this, we have a lot in common, actually. Farmington's about the same size as South Berwick. We have a literary tradition. You have Sarah Owen Jewett. We have Ted Enslin and Mitch Goodman, literati, or whatever they are. And we, like you, we have a school system that is very well regarded, and which involves a lot of parent activities. And like you, we're on Route 4 too, but we don't have the crazy intersection you've got with 230. Whatever, 236. Geez, you know, that's got to be a real challenge for you, for folks living in this area, and the truck traffic that comes bombing through here. I'm sure we send it down from Farmington, right, straight from Route 4. But yeah, I grew up in a town about this size, and I got to know my neighbors and community by delivering newspapers to them as a child, and later by serving mac and cheese and hamburger meatloaf to them as a teenager at the Shiretown Diner. And a couple things were sort of embedded in my personhood growing up in Farmington, Maine. One is that we don't tolerate bullies. Whether it's you being bullied or somebody you know or somebody you see is being bullied, we don't cotton to that. Secondly, people expect you not just to talk the talk, but to walk the walk. You know, we're not a bunch of big talkers in Farmington, neither are you here, but so those are two things I learned growing up in Farmington. So when I got older, I went to college, I dropped out, I worked, went back, finally got a degree at UMass Boston, left the state of Maine to finish my college education. Later I came back to go to law school. And when I started getting interested in legislation, I was lobbying on some women's legislation on domestic violence, on sexual assault, on displaced homemakers, and I could see that our bills that had tremendous support in the hearings were dying in the back room of the Appropriations Committee. You know how that goes. And we thought, what's wrong with this picture? So a couple of us got together and we formed an organization called the Maine Women's Lobby. And I'm very proud to be a co-founder of the Maine Women's Lobby, which is now the longest existing women's lobby association in the country. And they do great work, as Bobby knows, on a lot of legislation dealing with women, children, and families, have for many decades now. So then I got to be the district attorney for Franklin, Oxford, and Androscoggin counties. I was the first woman district attorney in New England, one of the first in the country. That was kind of a treat. There were a lot of bullies in that picture too. And I personally prosecuted tough cases of domestic violence, and put some of those bullies behind bars. And I lobbied and helped draft some common sense legislation on bail reform and sentencing reform to make sure that victims' rights and witnesses' rights were accorded in the criminal justice system, as well as the rights of those accused of crime. Then I was in private practice for a while, and in Western Maine did all kinds of legal work for small businesses and individuals. We did workers' comp cases. We did a lot of general legal work, and got to know the needs of small businesses in Western Maine. And then I got to be I was in the legislature part of that time as well, and served 4 years on the Appropriations Committee, which I think is a valuable piece of experience for someone to become governor, because I think you've got to know the state budget. It really helps to know the state budget inside out, and it's really hard to know the state budget without being on Appropriations Committee. And then when I got to be your Attorney General, I took on the biggest bully the state of Maine's ever seen in the person of Paul R. LePage. And first thing he wanted to do when I became Attorney General was he wanted to take thousands of Maine kids off of health care. And I wrote him a legal memo, because I'm the lawyer for the state, and I said, here's why you can't do that. Never mind the inhumanity of it and the moral problems with it, but legally you can't do it. And he challenged me, and he brought a case in federal court, and I fought back, and we won. He tried to take it all the way to the Supreme Court. We fought back and we won. We kept thousands of Maine kids on health care, despite his rabid objections. Taken him on a lot of other areas as well. I mean, trying to have private meetings on basic education policy. I had to sue him, tell him he couldn't do that, and we won. At the same time, I've taken on major corporations and the big pharmaceutical companies over and over and over again, and we've won and gotten conduct changed and gotten money back for the state of Maine for the Medicaid program and other things. I took on Standard & Poor's, Wall Street Giant, and Wall Street Giant Moody's rating service, brought them to court, and we won, charging them with their part in causing the recession of 2008. And with some of the settlement money we got back from that, I helped Maine people stay in their homes when they're facing foreclosure. And I was pleased and proud to fund those efforts to keep people in their homes. We also funded some of the Maine State Grant Program, Jobs for Maine's Graduates, and recently a financial literacy program at the university, which is going to go statewide, a peer-to-peer financial literacy program. So I'm proud of what I've done in that respect. And at the same time, you know, the governor just attacks me right and left. And when I joined the immigration lawsuits, for instance, supporting Hawaii and Washington states, he turned around and sued me because I wasn't doing his bidding. It's been difficult, to say the least. We got that case dismissed. With some of the pharmaceutical settlements, the money that didn't go back to the Medicaid program, I was distressed a year and a half ago when the governor vetoed 2 bills that would have provided life-saving Narcan, naloxone, to families of people with substance abuse disorders. It troubled me greatly that he vetoed these bills. This is Michael Ambler, my campaign manager.
Hey.
And he vetoed these bills, and what he said publicly was pretty distressing. He said, Narcan doesn't save lives, it just postpones death. Remember that?
Yeah.
And on national TV, he said these things, and I've never heard such a callous statement out of the mouth of a public official in Maine before in my life. And so I took some of the pharmaceutical settlements. And as the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Maine, I'm permitted to give Narcan out to law enforcement. And I bought a room full of Narcan, and I've given it out to now 65 different law enforcement agencies all across the state. As of last weekend, we've saved 292 lives. So that's what I'm about, taking action, solving problems. And that's what you'll see as me as governor as well. Backing up 1 second, I should tell you a little bit about my family, because you know I'm from Western Maine. You probably heard I got a couple brothers who are Republicans and a sister who's a Democrat. I grew up in a Republican family. We were right down the street from Margaret Chase Smith, sort of went with the territory, but as soon as I got old enough, I enrolled as a Democrat, and I stayed a Democrat all my life. And as it turned out, all the women in my family became Democrats, and all the men stayed Republicans. Go figure. And my mother died a Democrat. So when I was district attorney for 3 counties and living in Lewiston, I met and married my husband, Stan. And he was not a lawyer, not a politician. He was a tennis player and a tennis coach, and a pretty fine person. And he was a widower with 5 daughters. They were ages 4 to 16 when we met, and 6 to 18 when we got married. So that was a challenge. Here I was in my mid-30s, I'm a career woman, and no kids, never married before. And suddenly I'm stepmom to 5 daughters. And I figure if I got through those years, I can run state government, fighting over the hairdryer and the curling iron and the who took whose sweater. But I just tell you, the girls are all grown up now, and I'm very, very proud of them. And I'm proud to have the space in my life now, and the time to do what I think needs to be done now, and that is to take back the Blaine house. But I'll just tell you a little story. When I got married, I didn't know what these girls, how to deal as a step-parent. And their mother had died very suddenly of cancer. So I bought a bunch of Barbie dolls. What do you think? And I built a Barbie doll condo in the hallway of the house. And I wallpapered it and carpeted it just like I was a little kid. And we had Ken dolls with their heads cut off in the hallway and all that kind of stuff. And the Barbie doll had a wardrobe that was 10 times greater than stepmom's, I guarantee it. So I came dragging home from the courthouse one night after a long day, and the 5-year-old is in in the hallway, and she's putting this Oscar de la Renta dress on the Barbie doll. So I leaned over to try to make conversation, and I said, "Oh, Isola, Barbie's getting all dressed up. Where's she going today?" Without a hitch, the 5-year-old says, "Barbie had grand jury today." I go, "Oh my God." And then she said, "And tonight she's got to go to a Democratic fundraiser." But I will say that I think I learned a lot more about love and relationships from them than anything I could give to them, including Barbie dolls. Here, have a seat here.
One seat here.
And
Thank you. Very much.
yes, it is. Hi, hi. Come on in.
Wow, Jeff's sitting up in the middle.
Yeah.
All this time, I just thought he was my next door neighbor.
Gee, sitting on a throne.
Thanks for coming.
Do have a seat.
Thank you very much.
So my husband passed away 3 years ago. And, the last year of his life was kind of tough for all of us. And it brought us a lot closer together as a family. As I said, the girls are all grown up. I have 4 lovely grandchildren, all in the state of Maine. And I want to make sure they have a chance to stay here. And as hard as it was that last year of his life with all the medical conditions and arguing with the insurance company and all those kinds of things, I couldn't help but think that this is exactly what thousands of Maine families go through, week after week, year after year. If you're lucky enough to have insurance, you're fighting the denials, you're fighting the high deductibles and the co-pays, and no matter what, you're fighting with the high cost of prescription drugs, and that's a shame. But I also got to know some very good people during that year. I got to know a lot of CNAs and LPNs and nurses and people who were spending 24/7 taking care of my Stan and other people in his situation. And some of those folks are working at very low wages, trying to put food on their table and trying to make a car payment and a mortgage payment and maybe put a kid through college. But I think of them a lot still. And I think about the other people who were patients in the facilities that I was spending a lot of time in, people that I delivered newspapers to as a kid, and those people whose children and grandchildren have long left the state of Maine for greener pastures somewhere else. And I think about them every day when I get up and go to Augusta and try to fight for the civil rights and constitutional rights of Maine people. And it's for them that I'm running for governor. It's for my 4 grandchildren that I'm running for governor. It's for the people of Maine that I love. And while I am from the 2nd Congressional District, I want to make sure that we have one Maine, that we all work together as a team. I didn't like the divisiveness that came out of last year's election. I don't like the polarization and the divisiveness that goes on in Augusta, never mind Washington, D.C. But I want to build coalitions and work across the aisle to do things for the benefit of the people of Maine, to fight the opioid epidemic first and foremost, for instance. We can work together to fight this thing. You know, if you'd been governor 4 years ago or even today, you'd have seen this coming, and you'd have put somebody in charge of it, and you'd have talked about what's the best treatment available. Is it the hub and spokes model from Vermont, or is it this very disparate series of things we have in Maine that aren't holding together? What's the best education prevention program? Probably not the DARE program. Didn't work before. What's the best way to keep kids and young people off of drugs, off of heroin and fentanyl? In my office, I see this every day. We prosecute the felony drug cases. We have the medical examiner's office reporting to us every week about the dead bodies, 1 a day, from overdoses. And this breaks my heart. We see it in child support enforcement, which my office does. We see it in child protection. More and more parents and family members not able to take care of a kid because they're on drugs. And we see it in the increasing infant mortality rate. Maine's the only state in the country seeing an infant mortality rate that's rising instead of decreasing. These are terrible problems our state is facing, and we need to face it together. We need to we need to come together to work on new economic advantages for the entire state, not just for certain cities and towns, to make sure that we have the broadest and best infrastructure, and we have a very dispersed population, the most dispersed population in the country. But that doesn't mean we can't have good broadband in towns and cities, so that people can locate there and establish businesses there and have telehealth and teleeducation, broadband being so important to any economic development program. Doesn't mean we can't come together as a state and do the best thing for our state as a family together. So those are the reasons I'm running for governor. I firmly believe that the best chapter in this state's history is yet to be written, and I want to write it with you. So I ask for your support, and I welcome your questions and comments. Thank you. I'd love to know what's going on in South Berwick besides the traffic issues and, you know.
Well, I was wondering if you became governor, you'd be willing to give me a pardon for all my transgressions.
Oh, I'd have to look into that, sir. I'd have to run a complete record on you first. Or
Well, I
anything
sent it to Baldacci, he
Yeah.
said he didn't have time to finish reading it.
Is it that long? Is that long a rap sheet? Whoa, we're in trouble.
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, good, phew. And thank you, Bobby, for coming out. Yes,
So I guess, you know, jobs. What's your plan for jobs? Bringing jobs,
yeah.
cultivating jobs, where do you see jobs going? What industries do you think are gonna be growing in Maine?
Sure. You know, we're seeing a lot of opportunities in surprising places. Just the wood business. You know, I feel very sad because people I grew up with were working in at Verso, IP, and other mills, Rumford and all that, and they're losing their jobs. And the people, I go to Millinocket quite often, East Millinocket and Millinocket, and it's like a ghost town. But I favored the monument. I wrote comments in favor of the monument this June to Interior Secretary Zinke, because I know the people there want it now. They want the small businesses that are starting up there. Property values are slowly increasing. And broadband, because the three-ring binder does go through Millinocket and down to Wilton and elsewhere. So they have an opportunity to hook into that and start some businesses. I think we've got to be innovative. The wood industry, we're looking at more small businesses starting to make Lincoln logs. And of course, golf tees. Several hundred people employed making golf tees. There are people, we can do other things with wood. You know, Legos, hello. You know, we can do some things with value added to the wood and pallets and those kinds of things. More and more people are experimenting with different wood products, laminated wood products. I went up to Orono a few weeks ago and had the tour again of the cross-laminated products research facility. It's an incredible place. They, as you know, they've invented the bridge in a backpack, and there's a company that's starting to build bridges in the backpacks. They've even put a bridge up somewhere near Belfast that the university folks, the graduate students and the researchers invented here in Maine. They are inventing a material that will prevent the Mars landing capsule from burning up on entry into the Mars atmosphere. This is incredible stuff. You know, agriculture and aquaculture, there are people starting salmon farms. Agriculture, there are more small farmers and families coming back to Maine to start farms and taking over farms. When we thought 10 years ago it would be dead, it's no longer dead. More dairy farmers are getting into organic farming, and they're making some money. So we've got to diversify. We need high-tech jobs, which don't involve a whole lot of transportation costs and energy costs, hopefully. But energy costs are something we've got to address. You look at Tilson Technology and Maine Fluid Imaging, and some of these technology companies are doing very well, but they can't find the workforce here in Maine. They're having to bring people in from out of state, which is fine if you got it. And we need to be more welcoming to new Mainers, to people from out of state, to people from other countries. For one reason, I joined the immigration lawsuits, and I joined the lawsuit against the administration, against them reversing DACA, the Dreamers Act folks, is because I found there are hundreds of people in Maine waiting to be found eligible for DACA. There are 95 people in Maine right now who have come out of the shadows, now possibly facing deportation because of this. Those people are working in Maine, they're contributing to our economy, they're going to school here, they're learning a trade. I learned that about 60% of the immigrants in the Portland area have bachelor's degrees or better, and most of them are younger. We need a younger workforce. Look at us. We're getting, oh, we aren't getting any younger, as you know. We need to welcome these families to Maine. That's part of economic development. Good schools is part of economic development. I know you have great schools here in South Berwick and the Berwicks generally, and you should be very proud of them. But I wanna know what's happening that's right there, and other schools like Yarmouth, how we can duplicate that, replicate that in Fort Kent, Farmington, and Machias, and elsewhere. Because for young families to move here, to take tech jobs or other jobs, they want a good school system. That's part of a good economic development plan as well. Infrastructure is the other thing, and R&D. We're 37th in the country in the amount of R&D, the percentage of our gross domestic product. We've got to change that and invite researchers like Jackson Labs and like the Composites Lab and like MDI Laboratory. They're doing incredible things. It's not just a mouse ranch at Jackson Labs, you know. It's part of it. So, yes.
I have a follow-up to that and a second question. The follow-up is just, do you think that MTI has a long-term future?
Oh,
in
yeah.
Contributing to Maine, so kind of a vision for what role does that serve in the
Oh,
state?
good question.
Second question, which is not so fun, which is,
I'll stick with first.
but I talked to a lot of the candidates about this notion of the two Maines, right?
Yeah.
And that you've seen it so directly, and just what would you do as governor to try to get us to a place where there's any working together, there's any sort of bringing those perspectives together?
Obviously, it was very disheartening, taking your second question first.
Sorry.
It was very disheartening to see the second district vote for Trump
Yeah.
last year. But I think there were a lot of reasons that happened. A lot of the same people voted for Obama 4 years before and 8 years before. So I don't want to stereotype people who vote in the second district. I don't think that's fair. Many of them, my friends, family, and people I went to school with, and I don't stereotype the second district or the first district. There's a lot of great economic things going on in Cumberland County, for instance. I wish we could replicate that elsewhere in the state, but it's kind of unique. I ran for office 4 times successfully for the House of Representatives in a Republican independent district, Farmington and Industry. I'm the only Democrat to ever won Industry. Go figure, 900 people. But you do it by finding common ground. You do it by not talking about issues that are going to polarize you or separate you, but by finding what brings you together. What do you have in common? And you talk about the neighborhood, you talk about the roads, you know the woman who got elected in Virginia and Richmond, the transgender woman?
Mm-hmm.
Did she run because she was transgender? No, she said she ran because she was going to fix Route 28. My God, that's why they voted for her. It had nothing to do, I don't think it had anything to do with it.
236
Yeah.
is your ticket in.
Yeah. I'm going to fix 236. We're going to reroute it. Get the trucks out of here.
Yeah.
Out
You'll
of
get elected
downtown.
on that one.
Yeah. We'll work on it. No, so that's, you know, there were a lot of Republicans elected in the second district. Obviously, I work with a lot of them. Spent half the day with one of them today, Senator Saviello, my senator. And my good brother, bad brother, as it were. And, but we know what we have in common. We know what we can't agree on, won't agree on most likely. But he's worked across the aisle on health care. He was a stalwart supporter of Medicaid expansion in the state Senate, and I support him for that, on that issue. And we know that Amy Volk in Scarborough is a staunch Republican, but she came across the aisle to work on immigration issues and general assistance issues. So I would never stereotype all Republicans or all Democrats. My brothers aren't Tea Party Republicans. They're like Teddy Roosevelt Republicans, fairly rational, I think. And I grew up in a, as you know, mixed neighborhood, mixed family. I know how to have Thanksgiving dinner, not fight, not throw pies at each other. It's my nature. So, the two Maines phenomenon, that term has been around for 40-something years now, and it is time we got rid of it. There is some resentment from poorer areas in Washington, Piscataquis County, some of the rim counties, versus some parts of southern Maine. But then again, some of those industries in southern Maine take their workforce from Aroostook County, and there's a good work ethic out there. I want to be the biggest cheerleader for the state of Maine, not to use a derogatory term, but I think it's not a bad one. I want to market the state. I want to talk about how great a state we have, not mosquito land, I almost threw something at the TV when I saw that.
to do business there.
Or the most terrible students who can't get into college, all this disparaging stuff. It's like Richard Farina said, been down so long, it looks like up to me. Sometimes that's the way it feels when you're dealing with a governor who's dug in and disparaging all the time. And we can do so much better, and we're gonna do so much better. So I wanna talk to the world about what a great state we have, what beautiful natural resources we have, what great people, what great work ethic. It's part of an economic program is to market the state. And on this first issue, MTI definitely has a place. Oh, definitely. And I was in the Appropriations Committee when we helped devise some of the criteria for those grants, and I believe they've done a good job helping small industries grow, helping start industries. I think we need more co-working spaces, because the overhead can kill you if you don't have ability to share workspace and overhead. And just look at the Brunswick Landing, the co-working spaces they have there, and some MTI grants that have gone there. People inventing new medical supplies, new this and that, and just to watch them through the glass, just creating before your very eyes, it's amazing. We have great opportunity here, and MTI is part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for your service as Attorney General. There
Thanks.
are times I picked up the paper in the morning and said, thank you, because you were there fighting back, so
Oh,
I
thank you.
appreciate that. But what is your concept for energy for this state?
A concept for energy, good question. Well, first of all, we don't really have an energy policy in this state. We talk about solar, and yet this governor has gone back and forth on solar, and he's fought with his own PUC over over net metering. I supported wind for a while, but then I realized, and frankly, the horizons don't bother me that much. I have them all in Farmington, Carthage, and Kibbe Mountain Range. When I go north to go fishing, you can see the windmills. But the fact that energy is leaving the state, we're not capturing it here in Maine unless you've got a private windmill, which not too many people can afford. Return on investment's pretty long. But I'm a firm believer in community solar. I think we can do a lot more with community solar. We're the same amount of sunshine, basically, in the same latitude as Germany. And Germany has tons of solar farms. They're helping get off of fossil fuels by using solar. We can do that too. And yet we employ fewer than 600 people in solar industry in Maine, because we don't have a good policy. We're not encouraging it. We can help subsidize the installation, and we can find a rational net metering policy that supports community solar in particular, but also doesn't hurt residential solar. This business of weaning off of net metering for over 10 years, that's a weird ruling. And it's too bad the legislature couldn't get a bill through to deal with that. So solar is
They
good,
did.
but the
He
governor,
vetoed it.
yeah, the governor vetoed it. Yeah, I'm not blaming the legislature,
I know.
I'm blaming the process. And, in my area, pellets are commonly used for fuel, wood pellets, because the wood is there. So that's something we can promote too. But, yeah, energy costs are still way too high. Yeah.
Why was wind going elsewhere? I just was unclear.
Well, because it's
about that.
transmitted into the grid, and most of our energy, we're a supplier of energy, of electricity. We're a supplier more than we are a consumer. So all that reliability grid and all that goes down in Massachusetts and Connecticut. They're the bigger consumers. So, but I'm interested to know what you folks think, for instance, about natural gas, whether that has a future in Maine or not. It's a bone of contention with a lot of people, but something we ought to discuss.
Well, it might have a short future, but with global warming, all that's going to have to end sooner or later.
Yeah.
Or everything we're talking about tonight doesn't matter.
I'm fully in agreement on global warming. One of the things we've been very active in the last 9-10 months now is taking on the Trump Pruitt administration. We're in court trying to protect the Clean Power Plan regulations. He's trying to reverse that. We're forcing him to have hearings and go through the Administrative Procedures Act. I wrote Pruitt a letter 2 weeks ago saying you should have a hearing right here in Maine. Of course, that wasn't gonna happen. I said, if you don't have it in Maine, at least have it in Boston. We're gonna have a hearing on the rules in Washington, D.C., probably Christmas Eve, when nobody will show up. But, that's the way they act. But we're fighting them on the mercury, the airborne mercury rules. Airborne mercury, us being at the end of the tailpipe, is a critical issue. It is what's polluting our rivers. Our rivers are good, but the thing that's polluting them now is the airborne mercury from western states, midwestern states. We're fighting them on the rollback of the mercury rules. We're fighting them on the rollback of the ozone rules, the methane rules, which you know is a terrible greenhouse gas. A horrible thing, comes out of coal mines and whatnot. We're fighting them on the CAFE standards. We're fighting them on the energy efficiency appliance efficiency standards. Why wouldn't you have ceiling fans there? The manufacturers are already making them. Why would you roll back those rules, those standards? You're not helping
Money.
manufacturing. We're also, we sued Volkswagen of America twice, and we also sued General Motors now. People don't know that, but because they all did some of the same things, using these defeat mechanisms to cheat our state and to violate our laws, unfair business practices, and violations of our clean air laws by cheating the emissions control tests. And as a result of those lawsuits, among other things, 1/3 of the new vehicles Volkswagen makes are going to be all electric vehicles. Wouldn't have happened without some lawsuits. And hopefully as governor, I'll promote electric vehicles too.
Wait, I'm sorry,
No, we're going on about energy, it's such a huge
Well,
issue.
I mean, Maine, we can fight, but we're a very, very tiny state out of the 50. And so, as a governor, would you be joining other states in these efforts, or have we
Sure.
already?
And I have already, and a lot of these efforts, I got, Maura Healey's a good friend, the AG of Massachusetts, Eric Schneiderman, and the new AG in California, Javier Becerra, great people, and they've got a cooperative administration, which I don't. Even Charlie Baker, who's a Republican, is cooperative on these kinds of efforts, because he knows the need to protect the environment. So I have the advantage of being able to team up with some great people on some of these efforts, yeah.
Thank you.
Immigration, healthcare, student loan regulations, all those kinds of things. Somebody else had it. Yes.
Do you support single-payer healthcare?
Sure, ideally, and some 13 years ago, there were some studies done, they were very preliminary, about whether or not Maine could support a single-payer system. Something called Mathematica organization did a study, they did 2 studies, but then they got shelved when Paul LePage became governor, and so nobody's picked them up. Same with ocean acidification, we did a study on that, and then Nick Devon, and then this administration has just shelved it, done nothing with it. But on single payer, it's something we need to look into, see if it'll work. If there's a way to make it work, I'm willing to try. Vermont tried it, they found they couldn't do it without huge tax increases. Whether or not that's fatal to Maine's effort or not, I don't know. I'd love to look into it, but you can't do it without the actuarial studies, and I can't just say, I'll wave a magic wand and we'll have single payer. Ideally, yes, but gotta do it methodically, intelligently. What else?
I can keep going.
Oh, yeah, okay, sure.
What would you do to protect voter rights and reverse the trend that we've been seeing in a lot of places of voting restrictions?
I hate them. Well, I testified in the legislature on a number of bills that were mostly against bills from this administration and from other segments of the legislature that would have restricted students' rights to vote, would have imposed different residency requirements on different types of people. And fortunately, we have not had the kind of effort that Ohio had and some other states where they absolutely require voter ID every time you go to vote, that kind of thing. Matt Dunlap, I think, is a good friend. He's a wonderful Secretary of State, and he, the two of us have been on the same side of these issues. It's been great to have him as an ally. But not too long ago, there was a different Secretary of State and a different Attorney General. We had 3 Republicans, constitutional officers, and Charlie Summers was the Secretary of State, if you remember. And Charlie tried to suggest that most college students commit fraud by voting in the state of Maine.
And their home state as well.
But that didn't happen. It was never valid. They did a whole study.
A lot of taxpayer money for nothing.
Yeah, for nothing. And so, we have a pretty fair system right now, and I would fight to keep it. I actually testified in favor of a bill for automatic voter registration, AVR as it were. Got a nickname for everything, right? AVR. And, because I like the idea of when you become 18, you should automatically be enrolled to vote. You shouldn't have to make an extra effort. It should be part of your duty of citizenship. I like the idea, but then the Secretary of State's office came and said, it really isn't practical yet, we don't have a mechanism to do that. But someday we'll have that. So you don't have to make an extra effort, it's just automatically you'll become a voter when you're 18. Makes sense to me. That's off the driver's license and or the voter list. So, and nobody's exempt anymore. You know, they did away with the jury exemptions. Pretty much everybody. Yeah, so you had your hand up.
Yeah, I had a thought, if you turn 18, I saw a news item on the amount of homelessness amongst people in that age group now, and so it's hard if you don't have an address and you go to register to vote. How is that barrier surmounted, or is there a way to surmount that?
Oh, good question. There is, and Maine law does address that, in fact. What was it, Anatole France said, the law forbids the rich as well as the poor from sleeping under bridges and begging for bread. Our law allows you to live under a bridge and be able to vote in the state of Maine. You just have to say you're a resident of such and such a town. You don't even have to have technically physical residence.
Yeah, because I would think most homeless people would be somewhat reticent about admitting that.
And by the way,
you have to move out from under that bridge after all.
you taking them back home? You take them back? And felons can vote in the state of Maine, by the way. Homeless felons even, hey! We welcome everybody to the polls, you know.
And we're one of the few, what are there, maybe 6 states?
There aren't many, but Maine.
Here in Massachusetts.
We just never banned felons from voting, why would we? I mean, and they get to vote where they're from, not in necessarily the town where they're incarcerated, so like the town of Warren doesn't get 700,
Oh, they
1,200.
come into prison and they say, you wanna vote?
Yeah, in the town where you're from, so.
Right.
I mean, I'd love to see more civics taught in schools again, like we used to. I hate to sound like an old timer, but, you know, civics is a valuable course to have for middle school and high school. And so when we talk about students voting, not voting, students voting in local elections, when maybe they don't know who's running for selectmen, still it's part of your civic duty, and you should become informed.
Why'd they stop that?
You know, I think they rolled it into social studies. I think there's some form of civics still, it's part of the statewide curriculum, but it's just not called civics.
Social studies isn't even accurate anymore.
Yeah, it's been a while since I took the course. So, but Sandra Day O'Connor's gone around the country since she retired from the Supreme Court talking about the need to teach civics, and I agree. It's an important thing.
I agree.
Yeah.
So following up on that homelessness issue, I know Governor LePage has been sort of putting the screws on Portland as far as accommodating homeless people, and Maine's a tough place to be homeless.
Yeah.
Governor, do you have any ideas as to what these kids would do when they get out of
good
high school
question.
and maybe don't quite have a job that would sustain, you know, they're working 20 hours at McDonald's, where do they go exactly?
Yeah. Or in the resort communities where they might get a good paying job,
Right,
but how
for
can you
3
live
months
there?
a year, yeah.
Boothbay Harbor, or Bar Harbor, or Algonquin, Kennebunkport. You got it. You know, he's got all the answers tonight. He's got all the
My
answers.
nephew's a professional couch server.
Yeah, I think that's we'll have a website on
34, he's been
Craigslist.
doing it for
Couches
10
for
years.
rent.
Yeah.
No, affordable housing is a real issue in many parts of the state. And, you know, there've been some bond issues for senior housing, as you know. There've been bond issues for housing. This governor sat on all kinds of bond issues. We can do more affordable
I
housing.
think there's more issues for senior housing than those 18-year-olds, you know, who
Yeah.
all of a sudden have to leave home.
John Dora, we used to work in the Department of Labor here, now works for the community college system. He's put out some interesting statistics about the number of young people who are not working, and yet we have a 3-point-something% unemployment rate, pretty low. But there are a lot of people who aren't looking, and so they're not counted. And we've got thousands of people between the ages of 18 and 24 aren't working for some reason. And yet we have a demand, a talent search by some major companies and small businesses, looking for good people, to work.
They just don't have the motivation.
Well, I don't know what it is, but we need to figure it out. We need to go, dig deeper and find out why people aren't working when they could be working in a pretty decent economy compared to 10 years ago. Yes, sir. He's got the answers now. Yes.
Well, just one comment on the homeless. I was working for the shelter up in Alfred. And we're typically have been overfull,
Yeah.
and yet we also turn people away.
Oh, boy.
They can't handle everybody that comes in,
Mm-hmm.
and there's legitimate reasons for some of that. So it's difficult. But I guess, I don't know, first of all, I've attended many of your meetings, and I'm not sure I really should be here. I'm an independent.
Oh, no. Oh, my God.
Oh, my
Oh, my
God.
God. Sign him up. Give him a registration form. Give him a run form.
Get the torches.
Get the man a couch.
I changed to Democrat in order to vote for Bernie in the caucus.
Oh, good.
So I'm a strong Bernie supporter. But anyway, I guess we're all talking about jobs, and yes, jobs, and the other thing that is important to me is the drugs epidemic. My grandson, who was 20, overdosed in my house just a couple blocks from there.
Oh, my God. I'm so sorry.
In 2014. And my other grandson is now 15 months clean. He was
Good.
living down in, he's living with me, but he was living down in Natick, which is absolutely terrible. Anyway, so I guess this is just a comment, and I know you've done some work relative to the epidemic. I know you've supported some committees that have been out there. I've attended some of those meetings. I've attended about 8 of the so-called drug coalitions in this general area. This is not to say that they're not doing, quote, good work, but I don't think we're getting at the core problem.
Yeah.
I think we're still poking at symptoms. And yet the core problem, in my humble opinion, and I'm not, I teach I teach business change, organizational change at UNH. This is my 20th year. Professional development, not undergrads. Some of the same principles that are used in creating well-run organizations, some of those models, to me, apply to any addiction, whether it's Twinkies or heroin or cigarettes or whatever. It doesn't, it's all the same when you dig into what caused it. When you dig into what's happening in the brain, when you dig into the latest findings that are coming out and so forth. Yet, we're not down to that level yet, just like we're not down to, there's absolute science for global warming, but yet we have folks denying that. We have folks denying the cause, the real cause for the opioid problems and some of those. And yet, we're going after feel-good things, we're going after, what's that?
Too much money in it.
Too much money in it, and yet, we're going after easy targets, which isn't necessarily bad. So I guess I'm rambling. Let me come back to.
That's okay, I do that all the time.
Let me come back to, well,
Yeah.
I'm an educator.
He's
Those
paid to
drugs
ramble.
should be banned,
But,
and they
Well-
just won't do it.
what's that?
Those drugs should be banned, and that includes
Should we ban
nicotine.
Oh, probably.
Oh, chocolate.
Well,
That's not gonna solve it. I'm sorry.
No, but nicotine's a drug that's made to get people addicted. Twinkies are not.
Well,
Can I
yes,
add-
they are.
Can I just
Sorry.
comment?
Let me get back
Okay,
to
go
the
ahead.
job issue. Sorry. Let me get back to the job issue. And let me just, something that I am spending a lot of research on and putting into my next course. And maybe some of us here know this, maybe not. But yes, we're talking about the problems that we have today with jobs. What about the problems 10 years from now?
Mhm.
That we need to start now, because those 10 years are gonna go real fast. And 20 years from now, when we have robots, when we have artificial intelligence,
Mhm.
we have augmented intelligence, and we have Internet of Things, everything gets connected to
Yep.
the internet. Are you spending any of your time researching the impact of what that is gonna do to jobs?
I can only say, I visited the Google Innovation Center a few months back in California. It's so secret, it's not on Google Maps. You can't find it on GPS. But a couple of us AGs visited it and talked about, the Internet of Things. They showed us demonstrations of how things are gonna work very soon. Not 10 years off or 20 years off, but, when you walk into a school, into a shop, they'll recognize you from facial recognition, they'll know what you're looking for, what colors you like, your history of purchasing, your history of God knows what. I'm waiting for the time when I can walk up to somebody on the street and I think I know them, and we just press thumbs, and then I'll know all about them. Did I date them in high school? Were they on a jury that I tried a case? You'll just know all that stuff. No, that's an exaggeration, obviously. But no, I was a really an eye opener for me to see. And then we rode around in a driverless car. That was fascinating too. You feel very safe in them. But we can't have them in Maine yet, because they're not programmed for snow and slush and ice, just good weather, that kind of good weather vehicles. So I had a taste of that, that's all I'm saying, and it was fascinating. Whether or not we're gonna have new jobs and people ready for the new jobs of the future, it's a good question. And I don't have a magic wand to wave and tell you I have all the answers, but I've seen a bit of the future, as you've described it too. And I think that we need to make sure that the kids growing up in Maine have a great education, and that it's an education that's well-rounded, but don't forget the trades either. We're never gonna be lacking for plumbers and electricians and welders, okay? Never. And I toured my local high school today, and I was very pleased because, this is just on another subject. A couple years ago, I sued Bath Fitters, Inc. Do you know Bath Fitters?
Mm-hmm.
They'll come in and renovate your bathroom. They do a pretty good job, but they weren't using licensed plumbers. So we sued them. And they coughed up some money, agreed to behave better in the future, hire plumbers. They got $500,000. And I said, what am I gonna do with this money? And so I called around, and with that money, we started a plumbing program at Mount Blue High School, Lewiston High School, Oxford Hills High School, and Biddeford High School, where they didn't have one before. And I said, get some girls in those programs. And I'm pleased to report that last June, the highest achieving VOTEC student in Mount Blue High School was a girl in the plumbing program. So we're looking for the jobs of the future, yes, but don't forget the trades. They're valuable and they're well-paid jobs. Law enforcement is a valuable job. We have a hard time recruiting people who go into law enforcement right now. And women, minorities, all people, they're not going into law enforcement. These are challenges. We've got to do some better marketing and, yes.
So what about for some of the low-paying jobs? Can you imagine having a state minimum wage that's higher than the federal minimum wage?
I think we have that now.
Can we go higher?
It will go higher because of the law that was passed a year ago. The referendum has a graduated increase in it and a cost of living factor.
Is that a referendum that was actually enacted?
Yes,
Yes.
yeah. The tip wage got a lot of attention in the legislature, but the body, yeah.
The tip wage got changed, but
Yeah.
everything else went through on that.
Yeah.
And yet
Amazingly.
still people in Walmart, can't make a can't afford housing.
Walmart
and make it-
in Maine or Walmart in New
I'm
Hampshire?
assuming Walmart in Maine.
You can't force retailers or employers to keep people full-time.
Right, they're probably part-time.
Most of them are hiring full-time, the big box.
Can I go back to drugs for a second? Because I know you're interested in that. And I would just want, a couple of things. I mentioned the hub and spokes treatment model, and I talked about Narcan, bringing people back virtually from the dead. But now what we need also, recovery coaches at the emergency rooms, recovery coaches on call. Just like when we started in the domestic violence field and sexual assault field, we developed people with expertise who would come in on emergency calls and help people go through domestic violence issues and sexual assault. Now we need coaches, recovery coaches, to come in and treat people in the emergency rooms and elsewhere who have overdosed or who just want help. And we need medication-assisted treatment at that juncture. Suboxone, methadone, Vivitrol, whatever works. Penobscot County Jail is using Vivitrol now. They got a grant. And the cost of the drug itself isn't bad at all. It's a woman in Maine who actually manufactures it. But it's the counseling that goes along with it. And you're right that we're only talking about symptoms. But the long-term counseling, to see what's in the person's background, what adverse childhood experiences made that person more apt to become addicted to some substance than somebody else. That kind of thing. So we need long-term counseling. We need more detox beds, detox slots. But I will say one thing, as much as I say bad things about Governor LePage. He did something good 2 years ago. He put the bill in, and only he could have put this bill in, only he could have gotten it passed. And I supported it wholeheartedly. The bill caps prescriptions of opiates. It caps prescription opiates at the daily dosage level of 100 morphine milligram equivalents a day, and 30 days maximum duration for chronic pain, 10 days for acute pain. And it requires all prescribers to check the prescription drug monitoring program before they write that prescription. That's a remarkable feat. We're the first in the country to have all three things in one new law. So I applaud him for that. Now, there's been some tweaking of the bill to talk about, to deal with people with palliative care, and obviously hospice is exempt, and certain stage 4 cancer, that kinds of things. But it's a good bill, it's a good new law, and thank you, Bobby, for working on that too, because it took a group effort to get it through, and you gotta stop Maine had one of the highest prescribing rates of any state in the country. In 2014, I just spout off like a lecturer here, but 2014, Maine doctors wrote 1.2 million prescriptions, not pills, prescriptions. That's one prescription for opioids, hydrocodone, oxycodone, OxyContin, one prescription for every man, woman, and child, infant to elderly. That's appalling. And I've been talking to docs about this for years. Now that bill comes through, and now they've got to wake up and say, I got to stop this. And so there's progress being made. But it is a
I'm
lot.
glad you mentioned ACEs,
Yeah,
Adverse Childhood Experiences. ACEs, that's the acronym.
yes.
That has been scientifically proven over and over and over again, and yet it's been out there many years, that is in fact one of the major causes for anybody to get,
Be more apt to become
be
addicted.
more apt on anything, whether it be opioids or pot or
Yeah.
whatever. So I wanna reinforce, make that conscious,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. Let me offer, based on where you were headed, let me just offer a suggestion. Folks are coming up with, here's a good idea,
Mhm.
here's a good idea, here's a good idea. What's missing, in my humble opinion, is a system that looks at everything you just said, including what the governor, where you just gave the kudos to the governor. Yes, that's a piece of it. Yes, the, working with the kids at school is a piece of it. Yes, the, having folks in the ER is a piece of it. What's missing is, how does it all fit together? And yet, if you look at diabetes 50 years ago, and you look at what was involved, what was in place to help people with diabetes 50 years ago, and now look to see what is in place and what has evolved over 50, 75, maybe even more years, that's now in place. Let's not take another 50 years
Yeah.
to start with these point solutions, but we need a system that ties this together.
More
Everything-
importantly, we need leadership, and that's what I'm offering.
Well, yes,
I'm offering leadership to put that together, because that's what's necessary.
yes.
We have a scattered approach to energy, a scattered approach to healthcare, a scattered approach to the opioid epidemic. And I'm willing to take the bull by the horns and assert that leadership and get it done. And if you read the book Dreamland, did you read that book?
Yes.
It's an incredible piece of research. And, you know, we're taking on the pharmaceutical companies right now. We have a deep investigation going on into pharma and the distributors and the manufacturers. And I want them to pay for what's happened to the state of Maine, and they will. But the causes, as you know from reading that book, are so deep and so disparate. And yet, he brings us back to the idea of community. In the final analysis, taking of heroin is an act of isolation. It's an act of antisocial, not being part of a community. And it's the ultimate act of aloneness. And what he says at the end of that book about, you know, the best antidote to heroin may be simply community, maybe letting your kids run around the neighborhood instead of having play dates, just let them go ride their bikes and skin their knees and allow them to know that pain is a natural part of life. There's no pill you can take to become happy, no pill that'll make your life perfect. Don't expect it, but expect to be fulfilled rather than simply have pleasure. That's a long-term message, but it's a great book. Anyway.
I think that's,
Yes.
Sorry.
we're at that magic time.
Well,
It's all right.
never mind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But yeah, we just really want to thank
Well,
Jennifer
thank you. So
for-
I always learn something. Every day I go out to speak to groups and I learn something more, and I'm always anxious to hear more from you. So I have my card, I'll give you my political card rather than my business card. Pass this around.